Okay, so tonight our presentation is welcoming Tiziano Dossena. Tiziano is a longtime friend of Italian Charities of America. He is originally from Milan, and he has written 6 books, the pictures, the images of which, 5 of which you can see immediately behind him. He's also the editor of over 30 books, and he's the editorial director of L'Idea magazine. In 2019, he received the Order Sons of Italy Literary Award. And he, as I had mentioned, is certainly a longtime friend of Italian Charities. He's often at our gala, together with a number of his family members, some of whom have also taken courses with us at Italian Charities of America. And quite honestly, it's a pleasure to see Tiziano and to feature him as an event here today. So before I officially welcome Tiziano, I'd like to invite our president, Dominic Ciampino, to say a few words to everyone, and we can get started.
Welcome everyone to our Zoom meeting. This is part of our Italian American Speaker Series, and this is the first one we're having in the fall because we're still in fall. We had one back in October, which was a live musical event. We had a Sicilian folk group come from Sicily to perform at our building in our ballroom. And just a little bit of information about Italian Charities. We were founded in 1936. We're not a for-profit organization. We own our own building. One of the few Italian American organizations in New York City that owns their own building. And we provide a lot of different programs. Our mission is to preserve and promote Italian American heritage, achievements, history, culture, and language through programs, events, and language courses. We've been having language courses since we were founded in 1936 in terms of Italian, but in 2009, I had added the Sicilian language course, which has grown and has Zoom, and since the pandemic, it's also on Zoom, and we've added 4 levels, level 1, 2, 3, and also advanced. Last year, we also added a Neapolitan component, Neapolitan language, and that has been successful. We only have level 1. Our plan is for next year to have level 2 also. And in addition to that, we have an Italian American Speaker Series and also Italian American Studies program. We're one of the few, if not the only, non-academic entity that provides that Italian American Studies course. And of course, it's given by our Dr. Adam Hartman, who is specialized in Italian American history, and that's what that course is about. As I mentioned, since the pandemic, we have run with a lot of Zoom classes. Our membership has increased dramatically. We have students from all over the United States participating, and also Canada, and also we have one student from Sicily. It's been well received, and we plan to continue and to expand our programs in the future. And I invite everyone to check us out on our website, italiancharities.org, also on social media, on Facebook and Instagram, for our events and programs, so that you can participate. You can become a member if you're interested. Go on our Facebook page or our website, and you can actually sign in from there and join our membership. And you'll be getting all our information via email, and the upcoming presentations, you'll be aware of that. Other things that we do, we have an annual scholarship awards presentation and dinner. We have Italian night for Italian American Heritage Month. We also have Saturday night community dances. That's a biggie that has been going on since we were founded. And we also have an annual dinner dance where we honor prominent Italian Americans for their contribution to the Italian American community. So that's a little bit about us. Now I turn it over to our guest speaker, Tiziano Thomas Dossena, who actually was honored by us 2 years ago with a Lifetime Achievement Award. So I turn it over to Tiziano.
Thank you, Dominic. Thank you, Alan. Welcome Benvenuti tutti. We're going to be talking about our Italian American life, the importance of writing a memoir. We're not only going to be talking about personal memoirs. It's because that's, people say, oh, I don't care about writing a memoir. I don't have anything interesting to say. No, it's a little more complicated than that. When you think about your parents, your grandparents, your aunts, your relatives from Italy, if you are third, fourth generation, what would you really like to have from them? What would you have liked to have received from them? Is it properties? Is it jewelry? Is it money? Oh, yeah. Everybody likes that. But really, it's memories. The memories are the most important thing that people can leave behind. Now, in the old time, people used to sit by the fireplace, and the older people used to tell stories. I remember, don't have to go far in time that much, because I remember as a kid, we didn't have a fireplace in Milan, given that. But night, sometimes TV was a very new thing. There was maybe a program or two on TV, and people used to tell stories about the family. Oh, your great uncle did this, and all these recollections are so important because they are the texture of your life. Isn't it true? Right? This is what it is. Now, unfortunately, because of globalization, because of technology, because of the way society has developed, oral tradition is disappearing. What does that mean? That means that if we do not find a way to leave these family traditions, to leave these family stories behind us in a way that can be either read or heard through a recording, they will disappear. And that means that the story of your family will disappear. Now, most of us are very unlucky in that sense because they cannot trace their family to Leonardo da Vinci's time, and they might just know the grandparents. Sometimes I only met two of my grandparents. My grandparents were from the 1860s, so they died long before I was born. But even with the limited amount of memories, that's one or two generations, we still are memories. That's all we are. What we leave behind, the most important thing we leave behind is not the property, it's not the money, it's not the jewelry, it's the memories. That's the only thing that really counts at the end, is family and its memories. So that said, we as Italian Americans have something extra than most ethnic groups. Not to say we're the best, no, I'm not saying that, but we do have a very complex society in Italy, and it was brought here. In a lot of ways, Italian Americans are a very complicated society. It doesn't seem to be, doesn't appear at first, but it is very complicated. We are the one that has the most varied food, for example, right? I mean, in Italy, every city cooks differently. It's not like here, you have different hamburgers because they're from a different city. No, the food is completely different. The kind of fruit and veggies that are used in certain parts of Italy are not used in other parts of Italy. And so is meat. And so is pasta. Different kind. So that just said, even the food makes us so complicated, so complex as a society, Italian American. So our heritage and roots as a society are already complicated. On top of it, put the fact that we are either direct immigrants or son or grandparent or grandchildren or great-grandchildren of immigrants, and we have a different story that we need to carry and give to our children, grandchildren, and so on. So it's important to leave that behind. Now, the question is, what can you really leave behind? How important, how relevant is your story? Because everybody say, well, there's nothing interesting in my life. What do you do? What do you do as a job? I don't know. I work in an office. I go in every day. I come home. I eat. I go to sleep. I watch TV. I go to sleep. My life is very boring. But that's not the point. The point is that everybody's life is actually much more complex than it seems at first. When you start to analyze events of your life, you know, the interaction with the relatives, with the friends, the way you study, who you met in life, how you go about, you know, everything you do, right? Now, given that, there's also another aspect, whether you want to talk about you or your family members, which means it may not be that you want to talk about yourself, but you want to talk about your parents, because your parents came from Sicily or from Calabria, and they had this particular experience, and you have information about them, whether it be letters, documents, pictures, stories that need to be told, or your great-grandparents, or your aunt, or you know, whoever other family members. It could be even a family friend that is important and no one wrote about it. I give you an example. My brother-in-law in Italy, who passed away a few years ago, was a very important historical person. He was the one that freed Milan from the Nazi and fascist in 1945. He was a congressman. I wanted to write his story because he never did. And I had almost convinced him to record it every day. I wasn't worried about writing a book. I wanted his story to be kept. And that's what you want to do. And I did not convince him fast enough. He said, oh, Tiziano, don't worry about it. When I retired, which means nothing because he was already over 70. When I retired, I had left time and we'll do this. Well, guess what? He developed Alzheimer. And that was the end of the story, right? So, okay, I'm not trying to get you sad. What I'm trying to say is that you may have even acquired relatives or direct relatives that you want to tell their story about it. Now, the question is whether you want to write about it, whether you want to record it, or what kind of information you want to retain, and whether you want to publish it or you want to just to keep it for the media family. Those are difficult questions to answer, and they are, every case is unique. And it's something that if you do have questions afterward, I don't mean only tonight, you can write to me, you know, I'm sure Dominic or you know, Maria Elena will give you my email. You can ask me and I can contact you. I gladly give free information outside. That's what I'm here. I'm here to help. And by the way, the books behind me, or the 3 books on top, are not mine. They are just books about memoirs. That's what they are, really. That was the concept behind me. Anyway, the point here is to choose whether the memoirs or the memories you want to keep and you want to make sure they don't disappear are to be kept just for the immediate family or to be divulged into society. It's not an easy situation. It's not something easily decided, because when we look at our stuff altogether, we always think it's important, because truthfully it is for us. It may not be so important for the large society, and it's something that I would suggest after you assemble some of the information, if you decide to write, is to make someone from the outside read it, even not for the quality of the writing, but for the quality of the story. If the story is worth to be said to the outside public, or is it worth it just to keep it for the family? Okay. Now, if you decide to keep it just for the family, there's so many ways to do it. One way, the easiest way, is not even to write it, is to record it. Okay? Nowadays, you don't even need a tape recorder. You can get a tablet and you can just record whatever you want to. Make sure you make a copy of it. Make sure you put it on a memory stick, and maybe you make a CD. That way you can keep all the memories in an organized fashion just by saying them. You know, it's like leaving a letter conceptually. Okay, that's one of the way to do it. The other way is to do a scrapbook. Scrapbook, when you think of scrapbook, you think of all the people doing the scrapbook and putting all the little cute things. No, really, scrapbook is that you're going to write a story and then you stick the pictures that belong to that story there, just like if you would for a book. And it's a great idea if you want to leave your information for your grandchildren. That's a great idea. It doesn't have to be a published book. It can be something like that. So just to leave something behind, you can do it in an easier fashion than publishing a book. Now, the question is, if you decide that your story is relevant enough so that it should be reached the rest of the society, then you have to take different decisions, which are a little bit more complex. If you want to publish, nowadays, they have what they call self-publishing. Self-publishing means that you publish yourself. As simple as that. But there are some advantages and there's some downfalls. Okay. The advantages is that if you just don't care about the way it looks and you're not concerned about people's comments, and you have some knowledge of computers, you can do it yourself. You publish, you make your own cover, or you make your nieces or nephew or your children that are a little more acquainted with computers, make the cover, and you have a book out there. The problem with that is quality. It would be like, I know how a car runs, so I'm going to build the car. Okay, I buy the parts and I assemble it. It will not look like a car that is running normally, okay? So most of the self-published books do not pass the test. They either have terrible covers, they either paginated in the wrong manner because you have to know the bleed, you have to know all the certain things. They are not properly edited. And no one tells the person that wants to do self-publishing what's wrong with the book, because sometimes people confuse editing with correcting just the grammar or the spelling. That is not editing. Editing is a little more complex. The editor will tell you if you should not put something in your book, or if you're missing something in your book, or if your historical facts don't match the real history. You know, you're talking about your grandparents and you said, oh, my grandparents were in Palermo during the war in 1932. No, hold it, 1932, there was no war, not yet. So it's something important for the editor. So now when you do self-publishing, unless you know someone who's an editor and is going to do you a favor, I do not edit myself. I get somebody else to edit myself because we do not see our own mistakes. So you need somebody else to do it. So that's the downfall. The third downfall of self-publishing is that when you say I'm a published author, it is a little iffy. It will be like you said, like I said before, you build your own car and you say, what kind of car is it? It's a car. What kind of car is it? It's a car. I made it. Yeah, but what's the brand? Okay, it's the same with self-publishing. You do not belong to a group of people that will publish. You don't belong to a publisher, and therefore you don't belong to a society, a community. And what happens also that the marketing issue, the it will be like having a business card with just your name on it. Something's missing. So those are the downfalls. So you may save money if you do everything yourself, or you may not if you actually. I know people that did self-publishing, and what they did, they found somebody to paginate their book. They found somebody to draw the cover. And you know what? It's more expensive than publishing with a publisher. So you have to balance that out. You have to do a little research before you do that. You choose to do self-publishing. Now, the second choice would be small publishers. There's very different types of small publishers. When it comes down to memoirs, unlike poetry, who has a lot of small publishers that will publish you, there's more limitations in finding small publishers. Most of them request to share some of the expenses of setting up the book, because they know that you're not going to sell 10,000 books, so they're not going to make money on your sales, so they're going to have to recover some of the expenses. Now, you also have large publishers. Large publishers, like Simon & Schuster's, to reach a large publisher, even if you do have a valid book to be published, that you feel it should be the greatest book on earth, it's almost impossible to reach directly a large publishers without an agent, a representative. So if you do choose to go for a large publisher, be aware that there is a lot of blocks to overcome, a lot of steps, and it is very rare that you reach a large publisher. So small publishers usually are the best choice, but beware, because there's also small publishers who are not very honest and will try to just get money out of you without giving you the product. So they will give you the same product as if you did self-publishing, and they'll charge you an arm and a leg for it. And that's, do a little bit of research in that, don't just jump into it, and ask people. People are the best references. You ask people who did, their own publications, they published their book, and ask them what their experiences were. Okay. Now, the other choice here is whether you want to write the memoir about yourself or about somebody else. Okay. If you write about yourself, it's pretty straightforward. You know yourself, you know your facts. Although we do retain memories in a funny ways, we remember what we want at times, but basically you know your life. If you're writing about family members, like your parents, grandparents, you're going to have to be a little more cautious. You have to verify information, okay? Now, before you embark, let's say you do want to be published. Before you embark into writing a memoir, you have to decide, one, what the goals of the memoirs are. Even as a book, do I really want to publish the book just because I just want people to know the story of my family, or do I want to make it a big sale? And it's a different approach at times. The other item that you have to be examining is your ability to write. How good of a writer are you? Will you need extensive editing, or will you need someone else to help you write the book? Because there are ghostwriters. So there are people that help you write. Don't ask me to give you a name of ghostwriters, because I do know them, but I'm not here to publicize that. But there are people that do write books for other people, with other people. If you actually notice, when you see memoirs of movie stars, 95% of them were not written by them. They were written by ghostwriter. Most of them will say who the writer is. So it will be Jane Fonda with, and they put the name of the person they wrote. They actually wrote the book. Jane Fonda didn't write the book. Jane Fonda actually wrote her own memoir. I just chose a bad case, but they do choose to have someone, not an editor, and more than that, a co-writer that will help them with that. So that's something. But when you do go through these steps, be aware there is what they call financial involvement, which means that if you choose to write yourself and to publish with a small publishing company, there will be costs. You may or may not recover them with the sale of the book. Depends how much are you willing to sell your book, to go out there and do presentations like I'm doing right now, right? You need to do that to reach the audience because there are a lot of books out there. And we are saturated with TV programs, podcasts, books. So unless you go out there and tell people, people are not going to know and they're not going to buy your book. So that will, okay, that will be a problem. So to wrap that up, for that sections, when I say financial involvement, be aware there might be a possibility if you don't write it yourself, there will be a costly choice to get somebody else to write it with you. If you write it yourself, you can get somebody to edit it properly. If you find the proper small publisher, they will edit it for free as part of their package. If you find the wrong one, they will charge you for editing and they will charge you, and you don't know if the editing will be accurate anyway. Now, given that you have chosen to print and publish a book or not, how do you collect your material and keep it orderly for a book project? It is very important, if you have physical documents, to keep them in a certain manner. If you have old letters, certificates, tickets from boats, ships, and airplane tickets, and so on and so forth, pictures, anything like that, my suggestion is, it's very nice to keep all these old stuff, but scan them or take a nice picture of them and use the files as reference. Do not handle them all the time, because when you handle them, when you handle pictures, I've been doing one of the books I'll be talking to, which is the Tosti that you see behind me. I have letters by him, and I scanned them all and gave them back to the family before doing the book, because I knew that I would go over certain letters 5-6 times to get the proper information out. So if you handle all documents, especially the old letters, and when they send them airmail, if you recollect, they used to be so thin, and with the age, they will crumble and they will get destroyed. So you have to, important things, these documents, they have to be kept in an orderly manner. They have to be scanned or taken picture of. What happens after that you scan or took pictures of these documents, you have to create directories for these files and keep them in an order. Because if you have enough documents, it's going to be mind-boggling to get yourself organized. But if you organize yourself from the beginning, let's say you have letters, you find letters from your parents to each other, and you write down letters from 1933 to 1934, 1934 to 1935. You organize them in that way, and then inside you give them the proper name to the file so you can locate them. So these are logical steps, but people don't think of them at the beginning, and then when they are halfway through their books, they find out that it's a mess because it's hard to find documentation. So it's very important to keep them in order. Now, the other thing that you need to do is to verify information. we all know that it's easy to make mistakes. Okay, you look at TV and you see a piece of news. And sometimes even the newscaster will tell you something that is not accurate because that's what they were told. Now, if you record that and you keep that as a memento of that particular incident or fact, it may be the wrong one, but you have to verify if that piece of information was the correct information. So now it works the same with the personal documentation. You go and you try to verify this information. So if you have letters, and in the letters, people refer to locality or particular events, make sure that you verify these things, because people do make mistakes on their own, not intentionally, but you have to verify the information. If you go and use information from your own memories, make sure you verify, because memory is funny about that. Sometimes you talk to people in the family and you said, oh, I remember that my uncle so-and-so came in 1961. No, he did not. He never came in 61. He came in 68. Really? It's easy to do that. Now, how important dates and localities are? Well, they are when you try to put a memoir and it's going to be chronological. It's important, very important. Now, the third thing that is essential, it is when you collect information, it's also to write an outline of the story. The outline of the story is what they call the skeleton, or the structure upon which you built the house. So you have to build the house, and you're not going to just, well, that's not even building a house. Let's say you have to decorate the house. What do? You go in and you start to bring furniture. No. First, you go in and you make sure that the floors are clean and the walls are well painted and that all the electrical works and the doors and the windows are fine. That's what it is by making an outline of the story. You need to put down the major information pieces of the story so that you can expand thereafter and make it into an interesting story. If you do not do that, you're going to find out that says, oh my gosh, I forgot that. Yes, you will still forget things, by the way, because like everything else, memory is a funny thing. So when you go back, you realize that you do forget here and there. But if you do have what they call a skeleton, a structure, you will not forget so much, and you'll be able to fill in the spaces. And you're going to go into that house, and after you're going to bring in furniture, and then you can move the furniture if it doesn't work out, because you have the structure. So you're going to be able to move that information within the book, because you do have that structure that allows you to do that without creating chaos. Okay. Now, images. Don't forget, scan images. How do you scan images? You scan them in high definition mode. If you take pictures nowadays of anything, take it in high definition. What does that mean? Is use the most memory possible, and try to use them as JPEG, because for printing purposes, JPEGs are useless, but for passing on to anyone that is professional, JPEG is the best, because then they change them into the proper TIFF format, and however they want. Now, when you're looking for pictures to collect, you also have to remember, what is the relevance of this picture to the story? Let's say you're telling your own story. You're not telling your parents, just your own story. So now you go through your pictures. You don't want to put in 35 pictures of you when you were 18. As interesting as it can be to you, it may not be so interesting for the reader. So you have to do what they call a selection on relevance. That you can always remove some of them afterward. You can always say, I'm not sure about these two pictures, which one I would keep, but Remember to keep, again, the structure will allow you to put the pictures in a relevance factor, because the stories will be illustrated by the pictures that you have, if you do have pictures. Okay, so you have this documentation. Now you have the images. Images have to be saved in a structured directory. I repeat myself, but it's essential, especially if you have a lot of images. Like you saw, there is a publisher that publishes basically books that are mainly images. And they are like the Italians of Brooklyn, the Italians of New Haven. And there's a lot of pictures of Italian Americans and with their little stories underneath. Okay, you can do that. Now, that is done in a structured directory. That means that you start to put the pictures and you save them as picture when I was 18, pictures when I was 25, pictures when I was a uniform cop, picture when I was a baker. So all these things have to be saved in a certain way and give names to images. To save images, image 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, that doesn't work. You will never be able to organize yourself. So I don't know if you know how to, but all you need is to click on the name of the image twice. It will open up and you can replace the name of the image with the name that you want to. This way, when you save them, you'll be able to locate them fast enough, and you'll be able to use them properly if you want to make the book again. Okay, then you have another aspect here. There's not only one way of writing a memoir. I give some different examples of memoir types. You have what they call a fictionalized memoir. A fictionalized memoir is a memoir of a person, maybe yourself, maybe your parents, which has been turned into a novel. Why? Because somewhere in the story, you're missing chapters. You're missing information. So one choice is to fill in that information at the best that you can, with using logic and using fantasy. So you're using the real story, but you're filling in all the cracks and the open and the holes with fantasy or with creative fiction, creative details that will allow it to become a book, a novel, though, because it is maybe a novel based on a true story, but it's a novel. So that's one way to do it. Another way to do it is a classic memoir, straight memoir. An example of that is Cavaliere Dottor Gilda Battaglia Roro Baldassari memoir. The memoir is named Gilda, Promise Me. The title of the memoir is a sentence that the Pope told her when she was visiting with the parents, when she told the Pope that she didn't speak Italian. And the Pope, we're talking about before World War II. The Pope told her, oh no, just after World War II, sorry. The Pope told her, Gilda, you have to learn Italian. Promise me you're going to learn Italian. And she did. She became a teacher. So that was the reason for writing that title. But this is a three-dimensional journey of a universal woman, for example. She makes the way around the world and experiences the up and down of a career in civil rights and public service. She brings it into a conversation where her present speaks to her past, whipping up stories that attract and sustain attention while documenting a life full of adventure few women of her time could have had. Now, Gilda is not the rule. She is the exception. She had a very, very, very interesting life under all aspects. She was a movie actress. She was the head of a department of education where they installed the new civic minded system in New Jersey, and she was a honorary consul. And not many people have all these extra medals. She won so many awards, and she's a beautiful woman on top of everything else. So she got it made. Actress, teacher, consul, basically everything that is positive. Everything that is positive, she made it. This is not how most people's memoir would look like. So keep that in mind. Don't have aspirations to match other people's books. It's your story. You tell the way you want it. But this is one way to do it. Now, the other one is a novel based mostly on a memoir. Not a fictionalized novel as the first one I said, but the story of yourself. At a certain point, there's something missing in your story of yourself. When you look at it and you write it down, there is a gentleman called Badala. He's from Genova. And he came to the United States when he was young. He knew Italian very well. He had gone to high school there, and he finished high school here. He knew Latin, he knew Greek. And he wrote the story of his life. But at a certain point, he realized that the story of his life, to him, didn't seem interesting enough. It's not that he was having holes, like you do it a novel because you're missing part of the information. No, the information was there. He just thought it wasn't interesting enough. So he put a twist, he put a tragedy in his life, in the book he wrote about his life, that never really occurred. So what he did, he wrote a novel, and this novel was 80% his life and 20% fiction to make it more interesting. So it's still his life. People will recognize him and the relatives and all that, but he will realize that there is something in there. He obviously used fake names. There is something in there that is not true. So it's drafted as a memoir, but it is not a true memoir in that sense. Now, another way to solve the problem is when you don't have all the information, whether about you or whoever you write the memoirs about, your family, is that by writing short stories. So you take all the different events, instead of writing a continuous book and try to make it, let's say you are not a professional writer or you're not a novel writer, and you find it difficult to tie it in a way that would be interesting enough. But there is a way to do it by writing short stories. Michael Cotillo, for example, wrote the short stories about his father. He titled the book George Washington, moving portables and submarines, because his father could not pronounce Washington properly. It's really a funny book, and I'm happy that this gentleman wrote about his father, because his father was still alive when he wrote it. He sold the book. He was very happy, and this book actually was very successful. And actually, his father passed away this year, but he had the opportunity to enjoy the story of his life, seeing through these short stories. So Michael Cotillo was born in the United States, but his father was Italian, came from Italy. His mother was Italian American, and he felt that his father's story had to be told, and he did. He did it by putting down in short stories. So that's a way to approach. Now, another way to do it, and this goes back to me, I did this, is to focus the memoir on the aspect of the person's life. In this case, I wrote about my father. My father was an artist. So I focused on his art. I do talk about himself sometimes as a person, but most of it is about him as an artist. So that's a way to approach. In this case, in this book, it was even more than that. I did not even focus on him as an artist. I focused on him as a landscape artist. So it was more focused. So now if you have yourself or a relative that has done something particular, did acting, or you did a particular job that you dealt with people, you're a psychiatrist, or you're a medical doctor, or you're a nurse, and you have a lot of experiences in life, interacting with people and all that, you can write about that as a memoir, but you don't talk about your whole life. You talk about this aspect, your professional aspect of your life. So that's one of the other approaches that can be done. You know, it's in my case, now there's another biography coming out, which is a complete memoir of my father, complete biography of my father, based on research. It took me 9 years though, because he was an artist and he lived until 83, and I had to go back to the old town and find documentations and talk to relatives that were still alive, that are older than me, that could give me further information. And then the difficult part is to find pictures of all different paintings, different periods, and so on and so forth. Another way to do it, another type of memoir, is memoir based on correspondence, letters. Sometimes you go to your attic or your basement, and there is a nice box full of letters that belong to your parents or to your grandparents or to your aunt, and you read them because it's something that touches you personally. And when you do that, you discover there is a story in that letter. And I've seen that actually. Letters from Italy is a book that I reviewed not too long ago, and he actually shows the story of the love of his parents through the letters, because these two individuals didn't know each other, and the gentleman saw a picture of this lady from a relative of his, and she was with somebody else and other relatives of her, and he said, "Oh, I love this woman. Can I correspond with her? Can I write to her in Italy?" He's a gentleman from the United States, Italian American. She is from Italy, and guess what? He writes to her, and a love story ensues. It goes on for years of letters back and forth, and they end up getting married. And it's a beautiful story, and just based on letters. Yes, after that, not that you're going to paste the letters and put them in there as a reference for everybody to read your intimate conversation, but you do use the information from the letters to expand into what they call a story that will be interesting, whether it be a true novel or a memoir based on letters. Another way of doing it is the classic essay, a memoir based on documentation. Okay, what does that mean? In this case, you see right behind me this Tosti book. I happen to know this gentleman. Well, he passed away a few years ago. I met him when he was 100. He passed away at 104. There are not many people are that lucky. It's a respectable age. He was completely in good health until 104. Didn't have any ailments. He had completely his memory. He was able to read his poetry alive by memory without reading. And he wrote in Italian and he wrote in Roman. Now, why did I write this book? Because one of the two daughters found some of the poetry that he wrote during the war, World War II. And they were very much against the regime, against the fascist regime. So she published a book of this poetry. in Roman. When I saw the book, being that I am a family friend, I had a few objections. I said, you know, these are beautiful poems. First of all, you had to know Roman dialect to read them, to understand them. Number one, and that's fine. But I said, do you realize, I told her, that when you read these poems, you don't know what he's talking about, because he is making historical references that are very, very specific. And unless you lived in that period, in that town, in Rome, lived in the town and near Rome and in the city of Rome, unless you knew these people or you knew the historical period, you will not be able to understand this poetry. So it's a waste. So I told her, listen, let me look through it and let me see what I can do. And so what I did in this case, for example, was to do a little research on the facts that he refers to and give a background for each poem so that people understood the meaning of the poetry. When I did that, something else came out. We found letters to people during the war, referring to the regime. So we were able to create this image of this poet that is not anymore the image of, it's not anymore just a poetry book. It is a book about a person that was against the regime that also wrote poetry. It became a completely different concept. And this is a way to do it. It's an essay book. It does require you to know how to, let's put it this way, write papers in college, to be able to collect information and organize it, but it can be done. So this is another way of doing it. So there are many ways that you can do memoirs, and you can talk about yourself, or you can talk about your family, but it's very important that memories, whether they're ours or their family members, do not get lost, that they stay here, they passed on to our children, our grandchildren, nieces, nephews, and all the other people of the family. And that in case you do have very relevant information from the family and you feel that it should be divulged, then welcome, publish them. Let the people know the story of your family. That is all. That's all I can say about this without getting into too many details. I believe, Maria Elena, you can open up to question and answers.
Okay, just unmuted myself. So Alan, do you want people to, Alan Dominic, want people to raise their hand or just unmute everyone?
Okay, thank you for unmuting me, Marilena. Tiziano, thank you very much for your presentation. It was
You're
an
welcome.
excellent presentation, inspiring to all of us. You know, and what you're saying, the importance of writing these down before they're gone, I think is very poignant. You know, at Italian Charities last year, we lost a longtime member, Giuseppe Caruso, who you may have known, and he was a wealth of knowledge. It would have been terrific to have had an opportunity to record some of his memories before he moved on. Great. So at this point, if it's all right with you, Tiziano, we can open our discussion up for questions. Perhaps the best way for everyone to add a question is to put it into the chat. And so at this time, I'd like to invite everyone with a question to submit the question to the chat. It may make our lives a little bit more transparent here, and make sure you submit it to everyone. And I think part of that allows us to not unmute the entire room. So if there are any questions, but Tiziano, maybe to start the question and answer period, what we can begin with is how is it that you got into, did your interest come from with the genre of the memoir, and how is it that you got into publishing and writing and editing?
Well, in my case, my major goal was to write my father's biography. And when I started collecting material, I realized that it was going to be a very complicated story, because you're talking about someone that painted for 60 years, that he did restorations, he did decorations, he had all different kind of aspect of his art that are not typical of the artist that just paints, the painting to put on a wall. That was not his case. He did do that, but it was a lot more, and he was complicated. And then more years went by, and I was working. The time is a constriction, as you know. But he did start my interest by writing about other people. Then when I met Mr. Tosti, Federico Tosti, and I know his daughters, and I was with him for a whole week, in a beautiful small town in the province of Rieti, near Rome, but really that used to be Abruzzo, so you're really up in the mountains. And it was August, and we used to see all the beautiful meteorites, all the falling stars at night. And talking to him, I realized that if I didn't write his story, nobody was going to. And his story is very interesting. He was the first Alpine guide from Rome. He saved many people in the mountain. So he got many awards for saving people. So it wasn't just a poet. It was a lot more. So I went to do that, and now I'm preparing his biography, which covers everything. He was also a published writer. He published 9 different books. So it needed to be said. It needed to be told. And even though I'm not a family member, I consider myself an acquired family member. And that's what I was referring to before. It doesn't have to be a family member. It could be someone that is close enough that you feel this family and you want to tell their story. Or maybe you want to tell your story. I don't know, whichever works,
Perfect. Thank you. Yes, Megan wrote a question. And to follow up actually on what you had said, being an Alpine guide, about 5 years ago, I was up to Sudbury, Ontario, where a lot of the Italian community came from really very northern Italy. And at the memorial service, there was a collection of alpinisti who were dressed with their green hats and green vests, and they actually sang a song, and they had all immigrated to Canada, presumably sometime in the 50s or 60s, and it was really quite interesting. So beautiful. Megan's question is, I love this presentation. What do you do if the loved ones are gone? Are memories of others and personal memories just as good, though you can not get your loved one's stories directly? Do you think that this is just as powerful?
Okay. All right. If your relatives are gone, but you were told the stories already, it's up to you to put them down. Your memories are still there, then you can do it. Unfortunately, when they're gone, you can't ask questions. You can't ask clarifications. That's the problem with it. That's why I urge people to do it before, because people tend to say, well, I'll do when I have the time. The problem is that time is a gift, and you never know when it ends. So the earlier you start, the better it is. You try to collect the information. Now, if you're going to be discovering one thing, that when you start to organize your thoughts about, let's say, your relatives are gone, and you start to organize their stories, some of the stories will come back to you, because right now they are in a little box somewhere in your brain where they're not used. So you don't see them anymore. You don't hear them anymore. They don't exist until you start to recollect them, and they come alive. They come to you, and you're going to say, oh my God, that's right. Oh, they said that. And then you can always verify, because sometimes they said things that, yes, they are not there, but there are people that can verify. Maybe the cousins, or there's some kind of relatives they can tell you, oh yeah, they did that. and you can put things together. And when you put things together, you find out, yeah, there will be holes in the story because the people are not there. But the holes are getting smaller and smaller because between your memories and other people's memories, you'll be able to put everything together in a way that it will be acceptable as a story. Again, if I would suggest, if they are not around, I would suggest the short story approach is probably the easiest, because you can tell a story and it stands by itself. That particular story, that particular event stands by itself. You don't have to intertwine it, because now you have no way to verify all this missing information between story one and story two. But you can put them as individual stories and it becomes a very interesting book anyway.
Perfect. Thank you. Pamela Roderick writes, I am a second generation Italian American. My grandfather immigrated from Piemonte, and my other great grandfather was from Genova. Great presentation. Okay, I thought there was a question. Sorry, I should have read it through. Maria Terone, thank you for your presentation. And Maria is, I invited Maria to Mercy College, where I teach a few years ago. She's a poetess and she read from her poems. And I think just before the pandemic, we were hoping to host Maria, and then the whole world changed. She says, thank you for your presentation. Has Ancestry.com ever entered into your memoir writing? I ask because I gathered information on my late dad, who was orphaned as a boy. Through Ancestry.com, we have connected with someone whose grandfather and my late grandfather, who died when my dad was an infant, were brothers. And from that connection, I learned that my dad lived with his uncle for a while on a new piece. I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
What?
And from that connection, I learned that my dad, okay, my cursor had jumped. And from that connection, I learned that my dad lived with his uncle for a while, one new piece of the puzzle, that's it. And so she, through posting stories on Ancestry.com, she connected with other people and so on. And she's asking you if you've tried to do that.
Yes, there's Ancestry.com, but there's also other websites that give out information, some of them payment, some for free, but you also can, I contacted, for example, the town where my father was born, right? And I could not locate the house where he was born. Reason being, they changed the name of the street. Okay, so what do? I wrote to the Comune. Guess what? The Comune didn't know themselves because they changed it in the 1930s. Because my father moved out of his town. My father was from 1902. So he moved out of his town in the 1920s. And in the 30s, with the fascist system, they used to make all these beautiful, higher sounding names. And they changed the name, and it wasn't written anywhere, the old name. But there's an historian in town. So they connected me to the historian. He told me the name, the old name of the street. Now I found the house. I was able to get a picture of the house when my father was born. So there are people that are out there, and this was completely free. So there are people out there that are willing to help, especially when you go back to small town. You know, maybe the big cities not so much, but in small town, people are willing to help. And you'll be surprised if you try to trace back to an old town in Italy and you try to trace any history, you find out that you have a lot more relatives that you would want at times. and they're willing to help. People really try to do that. It is something, because it makes you feel good that people are interested by your own family. So, you know, it's an interchange. So yes, Ancestry.com is great. Hi, Maria. You know, I see a lot of people I know, by the way. I know Joseph Gacibauda. I published one of his books, so it's very good. I know Mark because I just interviewed him. And obviously I know Maria because we did a presentation together here in Yonkers. But it's important that, again, go back to base one. You have to start with the process. Then you decide what you want to do, because you may not be able to collect enough information to do a book. So you would say, okay, I'm going to do a scrapbook for the relatives. Or you may have too much information and you may have to focus on a particular aspect of the memory of the memoirs, in this case, of the story of the family. The homework has to be done. It's not as complicated as it looks. It needs to be started, like everything else. It's like to say you have to decorate the house. Well, it's not going to happen by itself. You're going to have to work in that house, look at the walls, look at the floors, and then you're going to decide what to do. And then when you start to do it, sometimes you say, that's not working. And then you eliminate what you don't need. But it's an act of love, because it comes from the heart, and because it means so well toward you and toward the people around you. Everybody will appreciate it. There is nothing more than I could want in life is to find information about my grandparents or my great-grandparents. When my father passed away in 1987, my mother passed away a few years after. When my mother passed away, my brother and one of my sisters, I have 4 sisters, cleared the house and everything. And they put away some documentation. So I was not aware for many years that my father had written a diary. Mm. One of my nephew went to visit a cousin, and she told him that she had a diary of my father. I said, why didn't you give it to Uncle Tiziano? He's writing a book. They did pictures of them. Guess what? I found out a lot of strange things about his youth, the details that he gave about his town. It was marvelous, even regardless whether you put it in the book or not, but it's marvelous for the people that remain to find out this information. Really, at the end of the story, we are just memories. So if we leave them behind, we leave ourselves behind. We don't leave anything behind. The houses, the cars, everything gets old, everything gets sold, doesn't count. Our memories are our memories. They will stay forever. At least you hope so.
Terrific. In the comments, Maria Lisella writes that ancestry.com is such an interesting resource, and the comune and the small towns often have a ton of information. Pamela Roderick asks, what is the title of your book about your father? She would love to read it, as she is a painter.
Okay, the title of the book, my father, the one I published already, is The World as an Impression. And it's actually a bilingual book. It's in English and Italian. You can use it for teaching, by the way, Alan, it's great for teaching Italian. I also did a portrait book bilingual, it's just for that. And he actually looks at his landscape work. That's why it's called The World as an Impression. The book that is coming out in the springtime will be The Dance of Color. It's not yet available. We are actually working on the Italian version that is going to come out by Christmas. And then in the springtime, we're going to be coming out with the English version. That is a massive book. It's a 500 pages, and it's a large book. It's got almost 600 pictures of paintings and family stories. So it took 9 years, though. That is not what I really suggest to people to do. That is, it's a real job to do that, but you can do it without getting stuck with a lot of work.
Terrific. I've shared a link on Amazon to that book, World Impression, and so if any viewers are interested in purchasing your book, they can just connect to that Amazon link.
All I have to do is put my name; it comes up anyway.
Terrific, yes. Terrific. And then Megan asks, what is your writing process like?
It depends on what I'm writing. For example, my writing process for essay book, like Federico Tosti or my father's book, it was very academic. I sit down, I have my research, I verify. It takes me a long time to write down what I need to write, and then I rewrite it, and I rewrite it 15 times, and it takes a lot. It's a lot of effort, because it's almost like you're giving a picture of it or something. You know, it's an essay. It's more like academic work. When I write for reviews, I write impromptu. So I follow my feelings, because I don't consider myself a great writer. I consider myself an emotional writer. So if my review is written by impulse, impromptu, he will be a real review, not what people expect out of whether a review of a book or a show, because I follow opera. I love opera, so I follow opera. I am not a musician, but I do write reviews about opera, and then I do write them digetto, as they say, like that. And then I obviously, like everybody else, you're supposed to always do a rewrite. You always go back and correct and change things, but I do not spend as much time as when I write essays. Now, poetry, because Maria Lizella is here and she knows about poetry. Poetry is a different animal altogether. Poetry for me, it's only emotion. So I do not do too much rewriting. I write impromptu what I feel. That's why I do not use rhymes and things like that, even though they do have their own rhythm, the poems, because if you actually read my poetry, they do tend to have the same rhythm. It's almost like a music in a way when you read them, because that's the way I am. That's my personality. One of my college professors told me, "Why are you writing poetry? You should write prose, because you're too technical." And it's true. I was building a genius, so yeah, I guess I was technical. But the reality is, because I am immediate, I get to the emotions, to the point. And when I write poetry, I write that immediately. I don't tend to rewrite too much. There is some always, correction, editing, Anyway, so what else?
Great.
I write about a lot of stuff. I used to write when I started many, many years ago. When I was in Italy, I went to medical school in Italy. It never says in my curriculum, but I was there for 4 years, and thank God that my hands would not have made it too well with surgery. I developed early arthritis, so that didn't work too well. But when I was going to medical school, one of the ways of making money for me was to translate medical books and write articles for the medical and dental fields. And those were very academic, and that, yes, the process of writing was suffered. It's completely different. It's completely way of writing. I don't suffer essays anymore. I love to write essays. I love to write the reviews, and I do suffer poetry, because usually when I write something in poetry, it's because a strong emotion has emerged, and I need to write it. So my poetry are not about the world out there, but the world inside of me most of the time. And because of that, I do go through somehow suffering in the writing process.
Terrific. We have a few more comments. Maria Lizella writes, "Thank you, Tiziano. Your suggestion to begin with a short story is great and manageable. Very often short stories continue into larger pieces." Then we have, all right, Joe Cacibalda, great presentation, Tiziano. Maria Lizella. Maria Terroni is also a poet and poet editor for Italian Americana. And then she writes, Maria Lizella writes that she is in the same position at VIA, Voices in Italian Americana, which is an Italian American journal. Okay, Maria Terroni, thanks. Everyone, very good. I think we're all set. Last comment, writing medical books, translating that work helped you in terms of being exact and choosing the right word and details. Thank you, Maria.
Yes.
That might be our last question. So how's your
Absolutely.
background?
Absolutely. More than anything, besides choosing the right words, which is true, but more than anything, it helped me when I write essay books, like my father's book, memoir, I would consider an essay book, or the Tosti book. I do tend to verify everything. Even information from the family, I tend to verify everything because I do know that memory is very tricky, and you know, you can make mistakes. Even when something is regarding you, or your family, it's easy to make mistakes. You verify it twice, you verify 3 times if you have to, but you make sure. And it's, yes, writing about medical taught me to never accept anything unless I saw it 2 or 3 times.
Great. And Maria also writes as last question, being bilingual has being bilingual added to your work and your use of language?
Could you say the
So,
last?
being bilingual, has that fact allowed you to help in your writing?
Oh, absolutely. Well,
yeah.
It helped me in my writing. It might not help me for the readers, but being bilingual, you see the world through a different color, a set of lenses. I find myself, poetry, for example, going back to what Maria Lizella was saying about poetry. Poetry, for example, I write poetry sometimes in Italian and sometimes in English. The reason being that some emotions, I associate them to the Italian part of me. Some of them are more to the American part of me. Now, I live most of my years in the United States anyway, but there are parts of me that are 100% Italian as emotion goes, and they have to come out in writing in that language. So knowing Italian very well, having a degree in Italian on top of it, helped me in English, because knowing any of the Romance language well will help you in English, because English has a lot of Romance in it. There's 70% of French inside. So yes, it does help you. It helps you with the nomenclature. It helps you with the words, but it also helps you understanding the structure. And I tell you one thing, there's more than being bilingual. Doing the edit, since I do the editing of books both in Italian and in English, at times it's mind-boggling, because the punctuation, it's different. Whether you put a period at the end of the of the sentence in Italian, in English you put it and then you put the quote mark after it. But other than that, he helped me understand structures of sentences more. One language helps you with the other, because it's like somehow it gives you a different foundation upon which you don't have anymore only English. You have 2 feet, nice and sound, because you have 2 languages. You have a way to confront them, and that helps you in both languages. It helps me when I write in Italian. It helps me when I write in English.
Right. Terrific. Excellent. Great. Well, thank you very much, Tiziano, for your presentation. It was an excellent presentation, and I can see from the comments we're having enthusiastic reception. So very much appreciate you taking the time to be here with us and to talk to us about your work, and especially presenting it, since you've done work for us with our newsletter in the past, and you've done, it's just terrific. So at this point, I'd like to turn it over to our president, Dominic, to give some closing remarks, and thank you again, Tiziano, and thanks to everyone at home.
I'd like to thank Tiziano for the great presentation and all the participants to this virtual Zoom meeting presentation. We have another Zoom meeting coming up, Zoom presentation, I should say, next week, December 6th, which is Tuesday at 7 p.m. And the presenters actually on this presentation, Mark Heel, And he's going to be presenting on, I guess it's one of his books, The Dilemma, to Emigrate or Stay, the Perilous Voyage to America, circa 1900. Mark, would you like to say maybe a few words to the audience here so that hopefully they'll join us at the next Zoom presentation?
Yeah, I can say a few words. Basically, it's going to go through just what a lot of our ancestors went through in making the horrible decision to leave everything behind and venture to the unknown, and then just what the journey was like on a steamship in steerage class. And I'm also going to just give you a little glimpse into another book on Sicilian American culture, just very briefly. Okay, I hope I didn't
So
freeze.
you can check out this page or our website, and you can sign up for that presentation. Again, it's December 6th. It's a Tuesday at 7 p.m. So I hope everyone joins us for that presentation, and you can also spread the word to other people that you might know that might be interested in learning more about our past history as Italian and Italian Americans here in America. Again, I thank everyone for participating and for being part of this great presentation. Hopefully people will start working on some of the suggestions that Tiziano made and start gathering some information about their loved ones and their memoirs, or maybe their own memoirs. And maybe we'll have a Zoom presentation on one of them, one of those memoirs that will come out of this presentation. Again, thank everyone for attending. Again, check us out on ItalianCharities.org, on Facebook for other events that we have besides presentations. Also, we also just want to do one more thing here about what we do, and I mentioned it before. We're also having a New Year's Eve party at our building, at our grand ballroom. Again, you can just check us out on our webpage and Facebook. If you're interested in coming, you're definitely welcome. Thank you.
Thank you. Good night, everyone.
Good night, and thank you.
Good night.
Buonanotte.